A very warm good morning from the Pink City, Jaipur. I would first want to thank the organizing committee of the fourth Kerala State Branch Conference of the Indian Prosthodontic Society for giving me this opportunity. And my topic would be key elements in research for publication. Whenever we talk about research, we say, and research and publication in particular, we say that the world is flat. You know what do we mean by this? We mean that when you are doing, let's say, a clinical practice, your competition in clinical practice is at most with the clinicians around in that area, maybe in your city, perhaps in your state. But when you talk about research and publication, the world is flat because we are actually competing with everybody who's wanting to submit their manuscript. If you're going for an international journal, you may be competing with Koreans, you may be competing with the Americans, with the Europeans, with everybody. And therefore, it's not just the quality of your research, but even the quality of your publication, which will determine whether you get accepted or not. So in that sense, we are all at the same level, competing for acceptance for our research work. When I also talk about research and publication, I always quote this movie. And if you haven't seen this movie, I request you all to go and see so that you understand the power of publication and not just conducting a research. This movie is about two scientists, and it is based around Einstein's time. So that was World War II, when where these two scientists were in countries which were actually at war. And they connect to each other because of the research work published by Einstein. And Eddington actually goes ahead, uses his publication and proves Einstein to be right and Newton to be wrong. So that is the power of publication, which has been going on ever since. So this topic that I'll be talking today morning essentially has two aspects. Some of it we are familiar with, some of it we are not. The research in itself has a lot of definitions, but it just simply means a very scientific, systematic method of finding an answer to some question. Whereas publication means putting any content available for public. You know, even Facebook posts are called as publishing. So I used to find it very weird because when we understand publishing, we understand books, we understand scientific literature. But even something as casual as it's raining today, once it goes on Facebook, becomes a published matter because it's now available for the public and it's open in the public domain. That is what publishing means. Now, this concept is something that I understood with time, and we are very used to this concept of reverse engineering in our clinical practice, thanks to implantology, where we think of the end result first, and then we plan everything according to that. So this concept is not new, and when it came new, there was a lot of buzz about it, but now everything is planned in reverse engineering and implantology. And you would be surprised to know that actually research and publication follows the same principle. Instead of just going ahead with the research, you actually think of the end, that is the publication part, while you are drafting your research. So you follow the same principle of reverse engineering, which we are used to in our clinical practice, in our research when we are drafting the research. So instead of just thinking about forming your thesis or your research plain and blank, think about what is going to happen at the end. Where are you going to publish it? And according to that, you go ahead and draft it. And I'll tell you how that can happen. So basically, when you are publishing, you have, your manuscript goes through a certain set process across the globe, whatever journal you might give. So if everything is fine and it doesn't get rejected, it goes through to peer reviewing. It goes to people like my contemporaries who are going to sit there and evaluate my work, whether it is scientifically correct or not. And here is where your research, whatever you have done, has to be justified and interwoven. And therefore, this is the point that you need to think of when you are actually drafting your research. So, of course, you follow all basic principles of research methodology, but while you are actually formulating your research, you think about what would the critics over there ask you once you were to publish it. That is what I mean by going by in the reverse direction. And I'll tell you how exactly at every step you can, really interweave your research and publication together, thinking about the publication while you are doing the research. So the other question also comes is, why do you actually need to publish? And for a really long time, I actually did not go ahead and publish. Even my thesis was published very late because I felt it's easier to prepare a scientific paper, present it in a conference for 8 minutes and get done with it. But that's really not the deal. It is the publication that is actually the last step of the research, which tells the world what you have done. It's also a record in time because it stays forever. And it's really nice to see how your work gets quoted or cited after 10 years, 11 years, because it stays there forever. So you add on to science, you also contribute to science, and there are people who will use your work further to build up their work. So therefore, publishing is far more important than simply presenting scientific papers. Also, nowadays, of course, the published work is adding on to the resume. And in fact, you'll be surprised that now even all government jobs are asking for research work, even at undergraduate level. So even if you're into private practice, you would never know when a government job comes out. And you would never know how your CV will help you to get that job just because you have publications in your resume. It's a fantastic way of connecting to peers, which I have experienced very recently, because you publish and you let the world let the world know what you're doing. There are people out there sitting who are doing similar works, and then they try to connect with you, and perhaps you can come out with something new with them. So it is a fantastic way of connecting with peers. And you also have a lot of online platforms now, like ResearchGate, which helps you to connect with people with a similar kind of work, and your work gets tracked, like ResearchGate tracks your work. There are lots of portals like Loop tracks your work, Google Scholar tracks your work. So there are people who are sitting there tracking your work as well. Not only that, whatever little work you do, it's your small MDS thesis, but someone over there might do a systematic review and use your work in their systematic review as well. So your work gets recorded, it gets cited, and it adds to the future resource work in prosthodontics and science. That is the power of publishing in itself. Now let us see how you can think about your research in terms of publication, or in other words, my topic, what are the key elements in your research which can help you to publish something. So these are the basic steps in dental research. Perhaps you're familiar with it. If not, I'll just quickly read through. The first thing you do is think of a problem, which is a research problem. Then you formulate it into research question and aims and objectives. Then you do a very thorough literature review. You further formulate the research problem in a form of a question and then hypothesis. You select your design and you design your study accordingly, which is called as the selection on designing of your study. Uh, step 6, I always add, because now, of course, we have a very set system, but we have suffered a point when ethical committees were not there, and then we could not publish because we didn't have certificates. So obtaining required clearances is very essential. It's also important then how you go ahead and execute your study to these minutest detail. How you collect your data, and then you analyze your data, interpret your data, and last but actually the most, that is publish your data. Now these are the basic steps. Now let's see what's happening at the end of the publication. When you write a publication, we are well aware of these little headings that come under original research particularly. But when you say introduction, what we are trying to say is what you did. So basically covering step 1 and step 2, uh, and also uh, formulating the research question and hypothesis comes up in the introduction. The second part is the material and methods as to how you did it. So that comes to the step 4, that is designing, obtaining the clearances, executing the study, and collecting the data. The third part is about the statistical analysis, which is relevant to step 9, which is analyzing the data and using the appropriate statistical analysis, the results. And the last part of it is discussion as to why you obtained or what you obtained, which is basically putting everything together and interpreting your research. And finally, concluding. We'll see this into greater details. Now, as kids, we are used to doing this particular match the following. But in research and publication, the equation is slightly different. Here, the writing apple will match only to the figure apple. But in research, what happens, everything matches with everything. It means introduction will match with the material methods. The review of literature will match with the introduction. The hypothesis will match with the statistical analysis. Material and methods will also match with the introduction. So if you have done everything correct, the match the following is so beautiful that everything matches with itself and it falls beautifully in its place. Let's see how that happens. So the first thing is introduction as to what you want to do, which has basically, few basic components like reviewing the literature, need of the study, adding aims and objectives, and adding on hypothesis when you're writing. So I'll just spend a few seconds on research question, though we don't essentially write research question in some articles do write, but essentially we are not really asked what was the research question. But I spend more time on this because this is, I believe, the foundation stone. This is where you start thinking. And it is just a basic scientific question which you really want to find the answer for. You can frame it in a very simple language and write it right on the top of your thesis work and keep referring and keep going back to that research question when you are doing every section. Is your material methods eventually going to answer the research question? So put the research question in its PICOT form, where you say PICOT means population, where you say I means intervention, where you say C means comparison, O means outcome, and time. If appropriate in your research question, you put time. So spend some time thinking about the research question and putting it down on your work. I'll give you a small example. For example, if you did identify and you wanted to understand if CBCT can be used for vertical tooth fractures. Now the research question would be, what is the diagnostic accuracy of CBCT in detection of vertical root fractures when you compare it to the periapical radiography? If I put the same thing in PICOT, P would mean population, that is the teeth with the vertical root fractures. I here means intervention, that would mean the CBCT which we are trying to evaluate. C is the control group. With what we are trying to evaluate it is with periapical radiography. How we are trying to evaluate, what is our outcome measure? It is the diagnostic accuracy. And time in this particular research question is not relevant. So whatever be your problem which you want to work upon, put it in research, in a form of a research question, and put it right on the top of your thesis book, or write up papers wherever you are going to start your work with. It helps you to give a great direction. After you've done the research question, we now need to polish it a little bit more and put it in a more objective manner. And this is what our publication asks for. That is, what are the research objectives? Now, research objective means it's a clear, concise, and a declarative statement as to what your investigation is going to do. And this also has some rules of formulating it. Your research could have its main objective, which is the primary objective. But apart from that, you might want to find out, while you're collecting the data, it might be beneficial that you collect this as well. So that becomes a secondary objective. And it's really nice if it adds to the scientific value. If you add a primary objective, you also add a secondary objective to it. So for example, if I'm just trying to study masticatory efficiency in implant-supported overdentures, fair enough, I go ahead with the study. But while I'm collecting the data, I also know that I'm collecting males, I'm also collecting females. So why not find out what is the difference in the masticatory efficiency between the male participants and the female participants? That's not what I really intended to find, but while I'm doing it, I can find it. So therefore, this becomes my secondary objective. Now, the other little confusion comes on what is the difference between aims and what is the difference between objectives. Some write-ups write only aims, some write-ups write only objectives. The journals don't specifically ask write down aims as well as objectives. Now, aims is a general statement. It simply is a statement of intent and outline what the authors hope to achieve. Whereas the objective is more specific when it comes to aims. Let's see this with an example. When I say socket shield technique, I want to assess the effect of socket shield technique on the buccal bone quality after immediate implant placement. It's a very, basic statement, and it can be said this is the aims. But when I say objective, now I want to define how I'm going to achieve this, and therefore I will put it more systematically, methodologically, and scientifically. So my objective could be to assess the effect of quantity of which bone, buccal bone, using what, using CBCT, after how much time, after 1 year of follow-up, using what, socket shield technique, and immediate implant placement. I can also, the second objective would be to access the effect of, to assess the effect on the self-perceived aesthetic outcomes of patients with socket shield technique and immediate implant placements. So now I have specific objectives. I have specified what I want to do. I have specified how I want to do, what is my time duration, and to some extent, what methodology I will apply to obtain my aim. Now, wherever I put this match the following slide, you just try to see how I am trying to interweave this with the rest of the manuscript. Because once you have written objectives, is this, your statistical analysis and conclusion should come out to answer your objective. So that is how your objective gets matched with something which is done right at the end, that is the statistical analysis and conclusion. In fact, the reviewers would first see what is your objective, they would then see your conclusion, and then they would see if you have managed to find the answer to your objective in your conclusion or not. So that is how it gets matched if you have done it all correct. The next part of introduction is literature review. And we can spend a lot of time just talking about what and how to do literature review. But basically, I will just give you a few tippers that when you are talking about literature review, you are trying to collect data which is updated first and foremost. That is what the reviewers look at, whether you have updated literature resources in your write-ups or not. Now, the second point is rather personal, where I try to put an Indian perspective to everything, whatever it be. It means whenever you are trying to do a literature review, you of course, quote all those works which have been quoted in, let's say journals of implantology and the bigger international journals. However, do put a note of work that our Indian researchers have done. This will help us to promote ourselves also, our national journal also, and our own fellow colleagues also will get more visibility if we are giving Indian perspective to any problem we are trying to do. There's enough work that we are doing. We just need to help each other to get that kind of a platform and visibility. Also, select articles only that are relevant to your aims and objectives. There may be a lot of things there, but keep selected your literature review to what specifically pertains to your objectives. You must take up tutorials, YouTube videos on how to search on PubMed or the other basic scientific databases that we refer to. How do you go ahead to go and do a literature search? That is what you must do. Once again, if you have done your literature search properly, it will match with your aims and objectives because you would have ensured that only those articles are taken in your review or need of the study and other areas of your introduction. Coming to hypothesis, now again, hypothesis is a concept we can spend a lot of time talking about, but I would just say that if your study is one which is testing a hypothesis, then it must be mentioned. If it is not testing a hypothesis, then of course it doesn't need to be there. But if it is, which most of our studies are, then hypothesis needs to be there. And it could be null hypothesis. Even better if you had a null as well as an alternate hypothesis to give a more direction to your study. But then again, your hypothesis, if you have mentioned it, it helps you to select, or your statistician to select the correct statistical analysis so that your hypothesis is either accepted or rejected at the end of it. So now again, an element of your introduction, that is hypothesis, will match with the statistical analysis which was selected and the results obtained. And that is why it is essential to put alternate as well as null, if you have an alternate hypothesis, null and alternate hypothesis in your write-up. So that will sum up the introduction part. And we've seen how, when you are formulating or thinking of your research, how you should put your publication part into your introduction aspect. Let's see, what would you do, or how do you go about the material and methods section? What are the key elements in your research which need to be taken care of for this segment of our publication? The material and methods segment talks about how you did your research. It explains into the greatest details simply because all reviewers or all researchers want research to be repeatable. I am sitting here in Jaipur, should be able to repeat the research unless, along with whatever variable I want to add, to whatever work somebody sitting in Kerala has done. And therefore, it is called as repeatable. So therefore, whatever we are trying to write in material methods section, it is written in such a way that someone can simply copy it and proceed from there on, given the limitation of your words, of course. Now, it also refers, a large part of material methods is where you need to use your mind as to what would be the study design when you are wanting to answer your research question. Now, study design refers to the framework of the studies which we are using as a guide for planning and implementing our research. And as you know, there are a lot of study designs which are there. You know, there's an entire table of the evidence of hierarchy, and based on that we try to select what study will answer my question to the best of form. Now, even though these study designs are confused, you might get confused as a young researcher. Should I go ahead with an observational study, or should I go ahead with a randomized control trial? You know, randomized control trial is what everybody's talking about. So should I go ahead and do that? Or just should I do a simple survey-based study? It could be a little confusing to understand this. But let me tell you, if you have done your literature search properly, if you have written your objectives properly, if you have got your research question in its place, everything will actually lead you to one particular study design. So it's not that you have to select a particular design and then think what I should do. If you have done everything correct, all of it is going to point out to only one study design, which would be able to answer your research question. And that is how, once again, everything matches and will start falling in place. Now, uh, the write-up part of material and methods, you see nowadays what is happening is the journals are all online. You hardly get paper published journals. So initially, paper published journals used to give word limits because of printing issues. Now, some of the journals, some of the very good international journals are having no word limits at all. There is no word limit. Only the abstract gives you some 350 word limit, but the write-up doesn't give you a word limit. So that means what the reviewers are wanting is to see your methodology into the greatest detail, more so for discussion, because there you have greater span of writing now because there's no word limit. So when you talk about methodology, if your journal has a word limit, then in your thesis level, divide your methods into small headings so that you don't miss out anything. And if there are no word limits, of course, the same thing can be applied to the publication. But if they are, then also, since you have divided your methodology into small subheadings, you will not miss out anything. Now, this screenshot I have taken, if you see here, the methodology itself is divided into small subheadings, and it has been written. It's not like what we are used to. We write methods as, you know, a whole huge paragraph, and we don't put smaller subheadings. But now this can also be done. And if it's not done for your main publication, at least it should be done in the research or in your thesis, so that you don't miss out anything. And it goes step by step. What was the setting? Who was the participant, or how was the samples fabricated? What were your outcome measures? What tools or methods did you use for testing to get those outcome measures? How did you go about the collection of data? Did you have several researchers? Did you go and, how did you go ahead and standardize your investigators? What were your inclusion and exclusion criteria? So you can write it separately as headings. Now, under material methods, there are many things, but I will just touch few things which are essential from the research point of view. And that is your sample and sampling technique or method which you are using. Now, sample, simply said, you know, whatever research work we are doing on a small size population or small number of samples. And when we are applying those results on a larger population or larger samples. Like if I study, let's say 20 people residing in Rajasthan, and I say their central incisors are larger than, let's say, population in Kerala. If I just study 20 people and give such a big statement, nobody is going to accept it. And that gives the significance of sample size. you need to have a specific sample size so that our statistics can be applied to it and mathematically we can prove or disapprove something. So sample size is essential. Now, there's so much talk about we understanding what is sample size, we are understanding how to calculate sample size. I don't think that is required. You have statisticians to do that job. All you have to do is give your research objectives, hypothesis, one key article to your statistician, and he will ask you certain questions as to what are the variables, what are the outcome measures. You answer those questions and let him calculate the sample size. That's not really your headache. What is your headache is to do your research following the sample size. It means you need to have a balance of the number that he gives you. Let's say he says 30 participants are required. You need to do 30. You need not do more than 30, and you definitely can't do below 30. You can't do below 30 because the mathematical formulas will not be able to approve or disapprove something. Moreover, like I said, by studying 20 people in Jaipur, I can't say that the entire population of Rajasthan has larger central incisors than the entire population of Kerala. It's not possible. It doesn't even make logical sense. So you can't definitely go below the sample size, but can you go above the sample size? Some of my PG students ask me, ma'am, 30 bola hai usne, publication ke liye, grant ke liye, let's do 50. Now, that doesn't work like that, simply because you are wasting resources, and it's rather foolish. If I can prove something at 30, why do I want to spend money and time doing something at 50? I have proven it at 30, and that should be enough. So therefore, as researchers, our job is not really to calculate sample size. Our job as researchers are first and foremost ensuring that our statistician gives us the sample size, number one, and we follow that sample size. So that comes in your feasibility. You may not have 30 patients. In today's date, I don't have 30 complete denture patients in my department, so it doesn't work for me. So I need to drop that study right there because of feasibility. So that is the significance of sample size. And of course, now you need to quote how you have calculated your sample size in your methodology in most of the journals. So for that, you ask your statistician. He will give you a paragraph or a formula or whatever software he has used for the purpose of calculation of sample size. The second thing I would want to emphasize upon in your methodology is inclusion and exclusion criteria. And I believe it's really important because it gives so much clarity to your study. And therefore, you need to really think what you are wanting to include and what you're wanting to exclude. And for time immemorial, I used to think inclusion and exclusion are exactly opposites of each other. So if I include males, I will very happily exclude females. So I write males in my inclusion criteria, I write females in my exclusion criteria. Or if I say patients of the age 30 to 60. So if 30 to 60 I have written in inclusion criteria, I happily write 70 to 100 and below 30 as exclusion criteria. But that is not what exclusion and inclusion criteria is. They are not merely opposites of each other. Inclusion criteria determines whom you are including. And once I have decided I am going to include these people or this sample, then exclusion means out of these whom I'm going to exclude. That becomes exclusion criteria. So you first determine whom you are wanting to get inside. Like this picture shows, all red people are inside, blue people are outside. But out of those red people also, if someone is showing some variable confounder, which I don't want, then I put that in my exclusion criteria and those people will get excluded. Let's try and understand with this simple example. I've just taken this from an article. Suppose the inclusion criteria says patients who are presenting, this is for, I think, again, nutrition and masticatory efficiency, presenting at least 1 year after becoming edentulous, patients who are able to attend hospital unaided, patients who are able to understand Japanese, and those who can respond to the question. Now, out of these also, I will exclude whom? I will not exclude patients who are having edentulism more than, less than 1 year. That is not my exclusion criteria. Once I have included person with 1 year of edentulism, out of that group, I'm going to exclude if I find someone with infectious disease or any other systemic diseases. So it is essential for you to understand in your study whom you are including. And once you have decided that I'm going to include these samples, what are the samples I'm going to exclude? Samples may be showing voids, I'm going to exclude. Samples who are already showing visible fractures, maybe I will exclude. So think about exclusion inclusion in this aspect and specifically write it in your methodology. The next part I would just give a short, talk about is on questionnaire-based studies. Again, a lot of confusion in questionnaire-based studies because we generally don't use questionnaire-based studies in our prosthodontic kind of research. But with short surveys or short studies included by the Dental Council, it's encouraging to go ahead with to do questionnaire-based studies, and students must do. There must be an element of public health in our prosthodontic research work as well. It's really essential. So if I'm wanting to do questionnaire-based studies, what my PGs do is a Google form, open Google form, fatafat questions dal diya, 20 questions dal diya, float it around. In lockdown, that's the easiest thing to do. Go to convenience sampling, give it to one WhatsApp group, give it to second WhatsApp group, collect the data, and finish it off on Google Forms itself. But that is not what questionnaire-based studies will do. You will never get it published in a good journal, simply because this questionnaire is not validated, it is not accepted, there is no research done on the questionnaire. In fact, forming a questionnaire itself is a research. So don't just go online, form a Google form, and go ahead with the questionnaire-based study. If you are wanting to do questionnaire-based study, which you must do, especially for local public health kind of researches. Personally, I really want that kind of data in prosthodontics, like what is the prevalence of edentulism in Rajasthan, in Kerala, etc. So this is a very good way of going ahead and getting public health data in prosthodontics. However, ensure that you use only standardized, accepted, validated questionnaires. Also, think about local language questionnaires. If they are not available, you can make one yourself. But there are websites, where standard questionnaires are available in local languages, like Hindi, for example. You might have to buy those questionnaires. You might have to take permission for using those questionnaires. But it really adds to value, and even in your research work later on for presentation and for publication, it goes a long way. So think about using validated standardized questionnaires. Think about using local language questionnaires. It really works for publication purpose. Again, a lot of force upon evidence-based dentistry, where people are wanting to randomize controlled trials, etc. But that should not discourage postgraduate students or anyone to go ahead and do case report publications, simple case reports, or even survey designs, like I said, even though they are not very high on to the pyramid. But let me tell you, now with the coming in of systematic reviews, everyone is reading everyone's work, everyone is citing everyone's work. So even if it's a survey, it might get cited. Even if it's a case report, someone else will collect those case reports and they will cite it and form a systematic review out of case reports. So there is, in my opinion, nothing less or nothing more, even though this pyramid is there. It's an equal effort to publish a good case report. It's an equal effort to publish a survey and to form a survey. So don't get discouraged by this particular pyramid. Also, because of evidence-based study, now there is a lot of emphasis on PROMs, what is called as patient-reported outcome measures. And if your thesis or your study is doing something, along with that, you are adding a component of PROM. Like I said, that example I gave you of a socket shield. If you said, along with checking the buccal width, if you also checked what the patient perceived, we might say socket shield is giving us bone and it's not causing bone loss. Yes, but at the end of the day, if both the groups with socket shield and without socket shield, patient is saying aesthetics are similar, somewhere the evidence speaks otherwise. So therefore, a lot of emphasis on patient reported outcome measures and also patient reported expected measures. That is another thing. Minimally clinical important differences is much spoken about in medical research, and slowly it will come in ours also. That is the smallest change in treatment outcome that the patients are perceiving. So that is another outcome measures which will slowly come in in dental researches as well. Okay, so let's move to the next segment of data collection and data management. So there are different ways which we are wanting to collect data. And most of our MDS thesis work is basically doing in vitro or lab-based studies, or maybe at most randomized control trials, etc. But there are other qualitative forms of research where you can do interviews, etc., and collect data. So various forms of collecting data. But for a researcher, the tip for collecting the data is that you tabulate your data properly. Use Excel sheets, use Google Docs for tabulating your data. And I'll tell you why. This is because now the journals have this concept of data sharing. The journals are now putting up this thing where you can add annexures and actually share your data. So if you have your data tabulated properly, you simply put it as annexures. In fact, you can get a DOI for your data also. You can actually get a DOI. And, there is a study design called as individual participant data meta-analysis, where researchers collect the original data and not published research. So they will collect your data, what you obtained during your research, and then combine those data of various researches and come out with the meta-analysis, which means, in other words, there is a huge importance of just my data which I collect. So don't just collect data on papers, on tattered papers and books like some of my BG students do it. Put it properly on Excel or Google Docs so that it is loaded on the cloud and it is not lost. At the same time, write about missing data and dropouts. It adds to the value. If I tested 100 patients, not all 100 patients gave me the results. Some of them dropped out, some of them didn't give me the data. Write about it. If you're doing lab study, in vitro study, you might have fabricated 60 samples, and you fabricated it with the methodology. But out of those 60, you had to eliminate, let's say, 5 of them. Mention it. Why did you have to eliminate it? So this gives more scientific value and authenticity to the methodology which you have used in your research work. Lastly, let's go to statistical analysis. Again, something which is not our forte. You should take hold of a good statistician, and actually a statistician and not some software engineer, or that's what people over here do. Get hold of someone who knows biostatistics, not just statistics. It is essential for them to have some relativity. You have different foray of statistics. People who are doing statistics in marketing, in advertising, in software companies, they are also doing statistics, but they are of no use to us. So it is essential to catch hold of someone with biostatistics. If you have done the statistics correctly, again, your hypothesis and aims and objectives will get answered by a correct and appropriate statistical analysis. At the same time, it is the interpretation which you and me have to do. The statistician will give your statistics and get done with it. But how I am interpreting that result based on prosthodontic knowledge, that is your and my value. So if he says applying the statistical analysis, no statistical significant difference was found. That is his job. But my job is to interpret that data. Open tray technique showed no statistical difference between closed tray technique. Clinically, it means whatever technique I might use, I will get no difference. So how I interpret it, that is my skill. And luckily, even JIPS is going to really promote on understanding this interpretation, because it's not easy, interpreting mathematical formulas and answers and putting it into my knowledge and my prosthodontics. It's not really easy to interpret it, but that is what we need to train ourselves in. Let's go to the last part, which is again, one of the most essential aspects of discussion. And I'll just give a few pointers which will help you to uh, write a good discussion. So here we go again, point by point. Discussion answers the question why. It answers the question why you did something, why you got something. So go step by step. If you used particular material in a particular methodology, justify that methodology. Similarly, if you got a particular result, justify that result, why you must have got that particular result. Some results can be justified because someone else must have also done it, and he justifies. So you already have a published justification of getting a particular answer. Fair enough. Some results may not be justifiable because you have got it for the first time. No one has got it before you. So either your work could be similar or your work could be dissimilar than the normal notion that is happening around. There is nothing wrong in coming out with something which is dissimilar or what is called as negative results. Most of the journals don't accept negative results, but now there is a trend once again to accept negative results as well. It's not necessary every time the null hypothesis is rejected. Somewhere you might accept it. So you might have something which was not done before. However, I can't come out of the blue and just give a statement and say this is what has happened. So I can't just come out and say Rajasthani people have larger central incisors. It doesn't work like that. You have to give a sound statement as to why you think this must have happened. Can you blame the genetics because of this? So quote some genetic study which must have found something similar, maybe on the jaw size, and then say this could be the results obtained. We are not sure, but this could be the result obtained. And then support it with some strength and some limitation. If my results don't match with something that's happened previously, it's fair, it's fine, you have done something new, but please put some limitation as to why you might have got this particular result. What were the strengths of your study? If you read the good international journals, there is a separate segment which talks about strength and limitations. Most of our work, we write limitation, but we don't write the strength. But now, the strengths are also highlighted, which makes you get a particular result. So when you write the strength as well as the limitation, you can justify why you got a result which may not be matching with the rest of the world, which works fine. So understand what was the strength. Was it the sample which you studied which was different? Was the testing methodology which was different? There must be something which you have done different, and that was your strength. However, the results need to be interpreted with caution, because you probably did it in a lab environment. You probably selected or did convenient sampling rather than using a random sampling, or whatever be your limitation, which you need to think about and write it as a limitation of your study. And once this falls in place, once again, everything which you have done, writing, starting from hypothesis to the aims, to getting your results, to not getting your results, all of it will start falling and matching in place. So ultimately, you would have either accepted or rejected. So write the strength and weaknesses. For reporting the research, you need to do follow certain guidelines. And thankfully, all good journals now put it in their requirement itself in author guidelines that you need to follow the standard guidelines of reporting. So it's not a big deal. Just go to Equator network.com, go there, it's freely available. First, find out what your study is and correlate it to the guideline and put it. I don't know, fortunate, unfortunate, how you might put it, but in vitro studies, there are no guidelines. So there are no guidelines as of now if you're doing a laboratory study, but if you're doing any other kind of study, the guidelines are there. Ensure that you have put the guidelines in place. You can tick it like that. And usme there are numbers 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B. So when the guides are checking, the guides can ask their students every paragraph, just write over there which guideline you have followed. So 5A, this paragraph, 5B, this paragraph, 5C. So even the guides are sure and students are sure that you have followed and everything has fallen in place. It's very simple, and it helps to improve your quality of publication. Okay, so the theme I got to see that this conference talks about empowering prosthodontics using technology, and rightly so. So much of digitalization that's happening around, and research is no different. It's as parallel to clinical practice as one would believe. And even though, even I have some reservation of just accepting technology till even last week I was more comfortable using Word, till my 10-year-old daughter started laughing at me and she said, Mama, the whole world has moved to Google Docs and you are still sitting on Word. So it gives you a little, there is a little hesitation, but there is a lot of technology which can help you to do research, and the guides as well as students must embrace this technology. You have softwares to do systematic reviews, you have softwares for citation, you have websites which help you in writing, improving your English. There are apps which will help you to do randomization. There are softwares which help you to do literature search. There are softwares which help you to find out what are the trending terms, so that you can use your trending terms in your literature, in your articles, in your titles, so that you get cited and your visibility improves. So there is a lot that is there, and we must embrace this technology. The sooner, the better it becomes. So embracing the technology both for the guides and students is essential to improve the quality of your research work. In fact, you cite the software also that you have used. If you are doing systematic reviews in your methodology, you should write that you have used Ryan software for the purpose of systematic reviews. So uh, it is there out there. It is only for us to take it in our hands and use this, just like the way we are using everything digital in clinical practice also. This is another thing which I always talk about when Cochrane has started. If you have issues in finding what your research question is, just go to Cochrane and type your main problem, whatever you are wanting to work upon. And Cochrane itself starts to break this problem in the PICO format. It gives you articles which will talk about denture stomatitis under these populations, denture stomatitis with this intervention, denture stomatitis with this comparison group and outcome measure. So Cochrane is also putting it in PICO format. It helps in better literature review. It helps in better searching your own questions and coming out with the better research. So when you are doing literature review and all, you can use these little softwares and tips which are available out there. Lastly, scientific writing for publication purpose is a learned art. It doesn't come automatically. It's in fact difficult, and we must keep on learning. We are still learning. There is no harm in accepting it. Uh, I mean, a state like Kerala still fluently speaks English. A state like Rajasthan does not even speak English. So there is a lot we need to catch up upon, but there is no harm in trying to understand this art of scientific writing. So regular updating of your own knowledge as to how to write so that it gets published is essential. Lastly, publishing, just doing research and not publishing is come equivalent to perish. This is the published article of the great researcher, though we are not looking at such things, but yet. So the it is an entire journey which starts from your first year MDS or some research problem that we think and conceive. And it's an entire journey which takes us through that methodology, and it ends, and it can end only with the last step, that is of publishing. Even if it's a small survey, that is what I would want to tell all PG students who are here, that even if you are doing this short study by Dental Council of India, if that survey also, please try to ensure that it is published, because every data adds and helps. Do it sincerely, do it rightly, and publish it. Every little thing that comes there will help to add onto data. So don't end it there. Go ahead and publish your work. Lastly, I would like to extend my invite as the scientific chairman to the virtual PG convention, which we are holding in our college, the Mahatma Gandhi Dental College and Hospital. On the behalf of organizing committee, my organizing chairman, Dr. Narendra Padiyar, myself, I extend warm welcome to all of you. Kindly register, kindly participate. We have exciting team and exciting things as much as we can do within the circumstances. So I extend my invite personally to each one of you to please come and experience the convention that we are working on. I would really thank from the bottom of my heart to the organizing committee of the 4th Kerala State Branch Conference for giving me this opportunity. My group on research in dentistry is on Facebook. I really like to interact. You're free to join and learn, and we grow as we learn. It's not that I'm some great person sitting here, but each day is a learning day, and we can learn together. At the same time, this is my book on research methodology, which is available on Flipkart, which is essentially to explain people about research methodology as pertaining to dentistry. So with that, I would like to end and thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you so much. I hope you all stay safe in these troubled times. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for delivering such a wonderful talk on research and publication. You had meticulously covered the different types of studies and a lot more. It was a very informative session, and you had explained every bit in clarity. Now, we would like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Chandrasekhar Nair, sir. We thank you for joining us with us today, sir, and we are so privileged to have you with us today, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Thank you for joining in, sir.
Over to our chairperson, Prashant, sir. Now the session is open for your comments and questions. Sir, please.
Uh, yes, Doctor. I think this kickstarted the scientific conference, state conference in a fantastic way. Madam, it was really interesting and unique keynote lecture because not in every conference we get some useful inputs regarding research methodology. Before going with my duty, I want to make a small announcement on behalf of our journal. Everyone is requested to subscribe our Journal of Prosthetic and Implant Industry. We are doing our level best to perform well. It is your turn to support us back. Subscription is absolutely free. There will be many benefits for those who subscribe, like expedited review and publication, opportunity to win prestigious Dr. Jacob Heisen Award for best scientific article, and ensuring global outreach of your articles. Please log on to our website www.ipskerala.com to subscribe. Subscription links will soon be available in various WhatsApp groups. Soon after this, this campaign is officially launched by our Honorable Secretary, Dr. Rupesh PL. Now, coming back to my duty, Madam, actually, this is a very big topic. Study design, hypothesis, statistical analysis, all these things itself are big topics for keynote lectures, but you have covered everything fantastically well. You have mentioned very critical points in a very simple way. I'll say one or two things which you have mentioned. One is the difference between aims and objective. No one is clear about that. What you want to achieve is the aim, and how you are going to achieve is the objective. And that you have talked it in a fantastic way. Then whenever you're using questionnaires, you have to use validated questionnaire. That is one important point that you have told. Then regarding inclusion and exclusion criteria, exclusion is not the opposite of inclusion. That is really well said. Then you have to use biostatisticians. That is one point that Madam has mentioned, and that is very, very important. Then very important thing she told was that don't worry about if you are unable to reject the null hypothesis. Even being unable to reject the null hypothesis itself is a scientific piece of evidence. And as Madam told, you will get ample avenues to publish with that result as well. And one important point I want to say is that even though Madam told that there is no weight limit, as far as possible, try to reduce the number of tables, because incorporating tables in online publishing is very, very difficult. We are facing the same issue here. Anyway, fantastic talk, Madam. Coming back to our business, let me see if there are any questions from these virtual learners. Madam, I think we have 3 questions. Can I ask?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. One question is that Dr. Roshi has asked, if multiple objectives are there in one study, can we divide the research and publish in different journals, or we can publish it as different articles in the same journal? And will this affect the plagiarism aspect? That is what Roshi has asked.
So this problem does arise when you have multiple objectives and you get tempted to publish in various articles. But let me tell you, it works otherwise even better. If you just see the recent journal articles which are published in international journals, there they publish lot of work together. So they are testing flagellus strength, they will be testing impact strength, they are testing surface hardness, they are testing lot of things put together and then publishing it in a very good journal. So what do you think is better? Publishing a lot of small articles in smaller journals, or publishing one good article in an international journal? The international journal will never accept if you just put in surface hardness as one parameter of your outcome measure. That's it. No international journal will publish it. But the same article, because I've done that work, if I put club 4-5 outcome measures together and put it, the international journal is going to take it, because there's a lot of work there that has happened. So in my opinion, it may be very tempting to go ahead with smaller journals and lot of publications. But if you just see the way the international work is done, there are a lot of outcome measures which are measured in one study, and then they are published in a very good journal. So what is your aim? Do you want to go ahead having a international publication tag with you, which is PubMed, which is, what all of us want our names in JPD and things like that, or, you want to put it down in some smaller journals. So it entirely depends on you. As far as plagiarism is concerned, of course, if you are putting all together in one, there is no plagiarism question altogether if it publishes as one article. But if you are putting it as multiple articles, then plagiarism will come if you have not ensured that your write-up is overlapping. If you are writing but citing your own work, that's okay. Again, self-citing is not that great, but it's okay. But when you are writing it and if plagiarism is not taken care, it will get test rejected by any journal. So plagiarism has to be taken care of, whether you are doing one article or 3 articles out of the same study. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, madam. That means if the promotion criteria is satisfied, you can go ahead with very good publications. I mean, now
Yes,
the problem
yes,
is
definitely, sir.
that is a big issue. Madam, second question is that is ethical clearance required for a questionnaire-based study?
Yes.
This question from Dr. Apurva. And if it is necessary, she is asking why it is that important as far as a questionnaire-based study is important. I'm concerned.
Questionnaire-based studies if it's in social sciences, questionnaire-based studies are used a lot. There, they don't require ethical clearances as much. But in all biomedical research work, questionnaire-based studies are required. In fact, you will be surprised how much detail is required because you are taking data from patients or people. You may ask email ID, you may ask their number, you may ask their age, you may ask what they are, their personal information. So how you are handling that information not only has to be written in the ethical committee, it has to be mentioned even in your publication, whether you took those information or not. And because you are taking information from people, you have to get an ethical clearance from your institute or your university or whatever committee is registered. So whether you are doing a simple questionnaire-based study, even if it's a short study of a PG curriculum, it has to go through ethical clearance. Ethical certificate has to be there. It has to be mentioned in your manuscript. Because you are taking data from patients or people, it has to go through an ethical clearance.
Okay, madam. That's all the questions that we have. Back to Anjana. Anjana, what is next?
Sir and ma'am, for this wonderful session. We'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. T.V. Patmanabhan, sir, the chairman of the Indian Board of Prosthodontics. We are so privileged to have you with us today, sir. And now I request Dr. Prashant Vishwambaran to award the certificate of appreciation to our eminent speaker, Dr. Pragathi Kaurani.
Okay, Anjana. On behalf of the editorial board of the Journal of Prosthetic and Implant Dentistry, the organizing team led by Dr. Cherian, and the Indian Prosthodontic Society Kerala State Branch headed by Dr. Vinod Krishnan and Dr. Rupesh, I request Pragathi ma'am to accept a certificate as a token of our appreciation.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Anjana,
you so much.
The certificate?
Yes, sir, the certificate will be projected now.